All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Regional Housing Strategy Peer Exchange. If you joined us last month for the Housing Speaker Series, welcome back. And if you're joining us for the first time today, I hope you'll find these types of presentations and conversations useful. I know we'll still have people trickling in, and so I'll kick us off so we can be on time, and hopefully everyone will be there when the presentations start. A few quick logistical requests. As a courtesy to our speakers, we ask that you please turn off your cameras and mute your microphones for this event. And if you're using a phone line for audio while watching this event on your computer, please also make sure to mute the volume on both your phone and your computer to reduce feedback. My name is Kirsten Carr, and I'm the Director of Planning and Sustainability here at MORPC. I will serve as today's MC, and I will facilitate a Q&A discussion with all our speakers at the end of this event. So as you might know, the Housing Peer Exchange is designed as a companion to our National Speaker Series. With these peer exchanges, we want to feature communities and organizations right here in Central Ohio who are leading the way with solutions to address our region's housing issues. And our hope is for the peer exchange to harness the spirit of collective impact in our region, to focus on solving our region's unique housing challenges together. So I'm really excited for today's panelists. They represent communities and organizations who are leading the region with programs that support housing development and protect residents from discrimination in the marketplace. We'll hear from our partners at the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, or COAAA, who will set the stage for us by framing the challenges residents, particularly older residents, face in the market before introducing us to programs that they have developed with the 55 and older community to help older adults find housing and remain in their homes. And then we'll hear from two communities, the cities of Westerville and Reynoldsburg, about new policies they've put in place to make it easier for residents to find housing and easier for development to build more of it. Developers like Tim Spencer with Trivium Development will share his thoughts on the City of Reynoldsburg's green tape approach to development and how it has encouraged him to build more projects in the city. I know we will all have questions and comments for the panelists. If they come to you while our panelists are speaking, simply use this chat feature here in Teams to engage with the speakers. And we will then try to get to as many of your questions and comments as we can this morning towards the end when we have our Q&A session. And with that short background, I would like to introduce our first speakers, Lynn Dobb and Frances Krumholz. Both are with COAAA. Lynn Dobb is the supervisor of the Community Outreach and Education team and has been with COAAA since 1995. She oversees a newly expanded housing assistance program, helping individuals at risk for losing their housing due to unforeseen hardship. She also works with family caregivers, navigating the system of care for their loved ones. We know that can be really difficult, and develops and facilitates a wide range of training for professionals in the aging network and the community at large. She holds a Level 2 Trauma Responsive Care certification and is a designated community resource specialist for aging and disabilities through the Alliance of Information and Referral Systems. And Frances Krumholz, she's the Volunteer and Engagement Coordinator at COAAA and has served in this role for 2 years. In this position, she promotes intergenerational home sharing through a program called Nesterly. We'll hear more about this during her presentation. She also coordinates the Aging Mastery Program to help folks 50 and older make the most of the gift of longevity. And she has launched a Friendly Caller volunteer initiative that provides social support to people in the region. Previously, she served as BEZA's Development and Operations Coordinator, and she has experience shaping development strategies with nonprofit agencies of all sizes. Frances holds a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University in sociology and Spanish. And with that, Lynn and Frances, please take it away.
Terrific. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share some of the things that we've learned here at the Area Agency on Aging as it pertains to older adults and housing. The first slide, as probably most of you are aware, we have a rapidly growing aging population. In Central Ohio, the 65 plus population is expected to double in the next 30 years. 1 in 5 people in the year 2030 will be 65 or older. That's significant, and that clearly will have an impact on our communities. This graphic here just shows another depiction of what we may see coming down the pike. And by 2034, for the first time in US history, we're looking at older adults outnumbering children. As we were introduced, we are from COAAA, also known as Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, which is a mouthful. Area agencies on aging, for those of you that may not be familiar, were established under the Older Americans Act, and we've been around for some time. There are 12 area agencies on aging in the state of Ohio, and there are 622 nationwide. We are charged with planning, advocacy, education, and our job really is to coordinate programs and deliver services to older adults and persons with disabilities so that they can remain safe and independent in their home. We do this by contracting with providers that may provide things like Meals on Wheels, transportation, homemaker services, and a range of other options. I think we all know that as we age too, if we have our choice, we'd like to age in place, stay in our own home for as long as possible. And we spend a lot of time talking with seniors and family members to try and help assist them in being able to honor those wishes. And sometimes, of course, there are challenges. We have seen over the past several years a growing number of 50-plus individuals, 50-year-old plus individuals seeking information on housing options. We have produced a housing guide in order to help with that. In this guide, we denote what properties are subsidized, which are tax credit, which are market rate. And so it's, for a long time, this was what we could offer, to be able to try and guide people towards what we knew was available. And we update this yearly to try and stay current, of course, and make sure people have accurate information. We do not go out and find housing for people, but this is our tool to help them. In 2019, we were fortunate and received some funds from former council member Michael Stenziano to help us, because the conversation had increased in terms of recognizing that older adults were facing real financial challenges in order to be able to sustain their housing. We found that, sadly, there were more and more older adults at risk for losing their housing, either having to be on streets, in homeless shelters, shacking up with friends and family. It really, the increase in challenges has been mind-boggling. The pandemic clearly has magnified the situation. We talk to seniors who are in their 70s and 80s getting part-time jobs in order to try and fill the gap from what they receive from Social Security in order to maintain their housing. It is heartbreaking, to say the least. One of the things that we have seen, and I imagine many of you are aware, that there is not enough subsidized housing to meet the demand. Oftentimes there are long wait lists, and when we say long, we're talking 1, 2, or even more years for people to be able to get into subsidized housing. A lot of the calls that we receive, people are just not aware, the community at large is not aware that these options are not abundant. So in terms of setting the stage for our conversation today, just want to make the point that Ohio is actually one of the top 10 states with the highest concentration of people over 65. So this is an issue that really is near and dear to all of us. Housing stability challenges that older adults are facing. I mentioned the financial issues, accessibility. We know that health challenges can change how we ambulate, how we get around. And so access to housing that is conducive to whether it's using a wheelchair or having, adaptive tools to make aging in place a possibility. Some of the challenges that impact the financial issues that older adults face, and this I think really resonates. You don't think about it, but if your spouse passes, the change in income can dramatically impact your stability in maintaining your housing. There are higher rates of divorce than in previous generations. People that are actually even in their own homes, the cost of maintenance and home repairs or making modifications formidable. As a result, we are seeing older adults, the ripple effect is carrying debt into their later years. Existing housing, we'd love to be able to see housing, a new housing adapt the concept of universal design with easy step-free entries, wider doorways, levered doorknobs. Those are some of the things that we are hearing and seeing, and hope that as we go down the road with our aging population, we can accommodate. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight some of the issues that we're seeing with older adults. And I turn it to Francis, who will talk about one of the things that COAAA has done to try and address the housing issue.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks everybody for tuning in today. So, I mean, as Lynn outlined for us, there are just a lot of different issues that overlap, that are weighing on the minds and the bank accounts of our older adults in the region. One program that we have recently brought to the area is called Nesterly. And Nesterly is a social venture that was founded in Boston at MIT, actually, in 2017. The founders of this venture were kind of inspired by the statistic that they learned from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, which is that by 2035, 1 out of 3 households will be headed by someone over the age of 65, and 48% of those are projected to be single-person households. And so the Nesterly model finds itself at the crossroads of a lot of trends that we see with older adults in the region. So we see a shortage of affordable housing, as we've already mentioned, a growing population. So we know that the Central Ohio region is expected to add another 1 million people by 2050, increasing property taxes, and additionally the loneliness that can sometimes coincide with living alone as we age. So the home sharing model aims to do a lot more than just reduce the financial burden of housing, although we're certainly hoping to do that as well. Next slide. Foundational to Nesterly is this idea that sharing skills and knowledge and wisdom between generations can be really enriching. And home sharing really provides a creative platform for building these relationships. We know that there are a lot of older adults who are living happily and independently in their homes, but that they might find themselves with more house than they need at this point in their life. So perhaps the kids are grown and moved out, whatever the case may be. Nesterly wants to make it easy and wants to make it feel safe and secure for those older adults to connect with a guest who's looking for an affordable place to live. And again, that intergenerational friendship and relationship building is a huge guiding light throughout all of the ways that Nesterly has been developed as well. In Columbus, so Columbus was the second market that Nesterly went into. So if you were to go to the Nesterly website right now, you'd see that they are in Boston. They're in the greater Lynn area, which is actually a suburb of Boston. And then they're in central Ohio. And then what we're seeing in Columbus is that the home shares really are affordable. So that's one of the goals as well. The average monthly rent that we're seeing in our market has been $436 a month. One of the things that can help with this is a feature that is unique to Nesterly, which is the task exchange option that can be built into a home share. So if there are chores that the host would like to delegate, and this, again, we're looking for somewhat straightforward tasks like what we're seeing up on this slide. The Nesterly makes it really easy to build into your home share agreement the option for a guest to take over some of those chores in exchange for a reduction in rent. And again, in Columbus, we're seeing that about a third of our home share agreements are taking advantage of this option, resulting in an average rent reduction of $100 per month. Trust and safety are really important to Nesterly. So everyone, both hosts and guests, goes through a multi-step screening process. Folks will need to apply to be a part of the program, provide at least 2 references, and complete a background check. So this one's a biggie. That can be difficult for people to manage on their own. So again, Nesterly is really trying to simplify that process for everyone, and to ensure that someone is who they really say they are is basically what they're looking for there. Nesterly home shares also benefit from an automated payment system that's built directly into the platform. So that can eliminate awkward conversations that might come up about money just because rent is automatically deposited into the host's account at the same time each month. It's automatically deducted from the guest's account at the same time each month. And additionally, Nesterly has this really responsive customer support team. So they are there for hosts and guests throughout the entire process. So from sign up, trying to figure out what to put in your profile, all the way through the end of the home share. And they'll help you customize an agreement that outlines the terms that are important to both parties. Let's see, I think we can jump forward at least one slide. Yeah, this is great, thank you. So some of the things that are customizable include the length of stay, the price of rent is something that's determined by the host, and policies regarding noise and shared spaces. One of the things that I really appreciate about Nesterly is that it is a legally binding lease, but it reads much more straightforward than a typical lease might. And there are literally fill in the blank pieces where we want to guide the host and guest through certain conversations just to make sure that they are both set up for success. So some of those customizable pieces are length of stay, price of rent, again, those policies about noise and shared spaces. It's really important that hosts and guests are both on the same page before they move forward with the home share. The minimum stay for a Nesterly home share is 30 days. In Columbus, the average length of stay has been 90 days. So again, that's something that's a little more flexible than a typical rental that you might be looking at. And really, you know, the uniting theme for folks who are attracted to Nesterly is that they are committed to this idea of intergenerational connections and strengthening community, finding creative ways to support one another and kind of work toward shared goals. That being said, it's a really diverse group. So a lot of hosts, as I mentioned before, they might be empty nesters. They might be recently retired, they may be widowed. We've also seen some cases locally of people who are saving up to do a home renovation to make it more sustainable in the long term, and an easy way to to build up those savings, again, while building these social connections, is to share some of that space for a little while. And guests as well come from all different walks of life. So sometimes they're students or young professionals. Sometimes they have just moved, whether that's a local move or an international move. In Columbus specifically, as opposed to Boston, we're seeing more middle-aged professionals take advantage of the platform. And if we can jump forward 2 slides, I'll just walk through quickly one of the first success stories. So Brenda was one of the very first hosts in Boston. She's a retired community leader. She had been living alone in her family home and was looking to make a connection with a younger person. Phoebus was an architecture student from Greece, and he was Brenda's first guest. So they had a shared interest in the arts, which gave them a really good opportunity to get to know each other. Pre-COVID times, they were able to go to museums and kind of explore Boston together. Brenda appreciated the opportunity to really take on that role as host. Phoebus was grateful to have that deeper introduction into American culture. And they remain friends to this day, which is pretty cool. So their home share has wrapped up, but they have stayed in touch. I want to walk through quickly how it works kind of from the user side. So for hosts, it's free to sign up and create a profile. You can tell a little bit about yourselves, your interests, details about the home and the space that you're offering. And you can also discuss what you might be looking for in a guest. A very similar process for guests where they can fill out a profile to tell a bit about themselves. An interested guest will send a booking request to a host, and they will begin communication by chatting directly inside of Nesterly's secure messaging platform. Once they've talked for a bit, we encourage folks to meet either by a video conference, maybe in person, at least a telephone call. And then if everything is seeming like a good fit, the host confirms the details. Both parties sign and the guests can move in. There are a couple of nominal additional costs to the users. So there's a one-time booking fee, which varies depending on the length of the home share. It's going to be somewhere between $95 or $195. And there's an ongoing 2.5% monthly service fee, which covers that secure payment processing system, the ongoing customer support, those types of things. And so just to wrap things up, our goal, we were kind of sidelined by COVID. We had to really adjust our plans for rollout over the last year. We had just launched in fall of 2019. So we are excited as we see this light at the end of the tunnel to continue to build these types of connections throughout Central Ohio. We'd love to see this program grow. And we hope that by doing this, we can make for a more interconnected and affordable community, one home at a time. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lynn and Francis. And Francis, just one quick question that came up that makes sense to ask now rather than to wait later. The question was, are couples ever guests in Nesterly?
Yes, and that's actually something that a host can say kind of right off the bat. It will be on their profile page of whether or not they might be interested in hosting a couple. So again, that will work for some people, but not for everyone. It certainly doesn't exclude folks from using the platform.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing this program with us. I know a lot of us haven't heard about it before, so it's really interesting concept to learn about and to dive into deeper. And I think some of our communities, might want to follow up with you and see how they can bring it into their cities and villages too.
I would love that.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. And to all of you, I got a couple private chats where people weren't able to see the screen. If that was the case for you, you might have the screen on the bottom of the your screen, the slides on the bottom of your screen and the speaker in the forefront. If that's the case, just double click on the slides itself and then it should make them bigger. Just wanted to share that in case others had that issue as well. So moving on with our presentations, I'm now happy to introduce Carolyn Thurman, who's the Deputy Director of Planning and Development for the City of Westerville, to talk a little bit more about protecting our residents from source of income discrimination. Carolyn is passionate about addressing the affordable housing crisis and combating housing discrimination, and she's been advocating for fair housing in the Central Ohio region for quite a while. She has a master's in city and regional planning from The Ohio State University and a bachelor's in psychology from Case Western Reserve University. Carolyn, we're interested to hear what your thoughts are and what you've been up to in the city of Westerville. And if everyone else could please turn off their cameras as well so that we can see Carolyn, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi. Like Kristen just said, I'm Carolyn Thurman, the Deputy Director of Planning and Development for the City of Westerville. And as she mentioned, I've been working tangentially with fair housing for the better part of a decade at this point. And I mention fair housing because I feel that an understanding of fair housing is key to understanding why source of income non-discrimination laws are so important. So the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1964, and it prohibits housing discrimination on the basis of race, sex, gender, national origin, disability, family status, and age. So this was part of the civil rights bills that came out in the 60s, and the intention is to address issues of residential segregation by ensuring that people that fell into these protected classes had access to neighborhoods of choice, that they could choose where they wanted to live. So I mention that because a lot of times when people hear about source of income discrimination, they're like, well, why is that important? So source of income discrimination is when a landlord has the ability to tell a tenant that they don't include certain types of income when they're looking to see if they can afford a unit. So that landlord may say that we don't include Social Security payments, or we don't include alimony or child support, or disability payments, or what have you, which reduces the income that that tenant can show in the application and makes it more likely that that tenant would be turned away and not be able to access that housing. And if you notice in the examples I gave, a lot of times those types of income are used by people that would also fall into one of the fair housing protected classes. So a landlord may not say, oh, I don't rent to folks with a physical disability. However, that landlord might say, oh, I don't accept disability payments as income. So the end result is the same, that household, that disabled household may not be able to access housing, but instead of it being directly because they fall in a protected class, the landlord is just hidden behind how they have decided to pay for, or how they're able to pay for that unit. So effectively, what that means is that source of income discrimination ends up being a legal way to cover up for illegal discrimination. When we started looking at this at the City of Westerville, our first question was, well, how often does that happen? And it's hard to tell because right now, source of income is a legal form of discrimination, meaning that if a tenant has this experience with the landlord, and even if they go to someone and say, hey, this landlord is saying that I can't use my child support payments to help pay my rent, can you help me? The answer is no. There's without it being illegal in the books, there's nothing that organization that they reach out to can do. So it also doesn't get tracked very well. Although I'll say anecdotally, if you reach out to organizations that are doing landlord-tenant work or that are providing housing vouchers in whatever form, you'll hear them say often, my clients are having a hard time accessing housing because landlords are turning them away because of how they choose to pay. And I'll say that if you are within the City of Columbus or Franklin County, there's something called the Franklin County Analysis of Impediments that was written in 2018 that goes into a lot of detail about the issues with fair housing we're seeing in Franklin County. And if you're outside of Franklin County, the state of Ohio has an analysis of impediments that will cover all the other counties and jurisdictions within the MORPC footprint that looks at the same thing. So there's a lot of evidence out there that fair housing violations that are explicit are happening. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the source of income issue is also happening. And so it doesn't really take much to arrive at this conclusion that there's something going on here. I'll say that looking at that Franklin County analysis of impediments, one of the key stats that stands out to me is that survey respondents, less than half of them knew how to file a complaint, even if they were able to identify that they had been discriminated against. So that's another factor to consider when trying to consider how big of an issue this is in your community. So the majority of the tenants affected don't even know where to go for assistance. Those that then do know where to go, the process takes a long time. So if you are a vulnerable population and you need housing immediately, dealing with a month-long process to sit through mediation with a landlord that doesn't want you there is probably not the route you're going to go down. You're going to try to find whatever housing you can to make sure that your household has some sort of stable situation. And I bring up these issues because these are important to consider when your municipality is looking at source of income non-discrimination laws, because you want to make sure that whatever you put into place has a clear mechanism to provide education to the community so that tenants know what their rights are and landlords know what their responsibilities are. And you also want to make sure that there is a clear mechanism for folks to reach out when they do need assistance, so that we're not just adding to the situation where, like, yeah, sure, it's illegal, but it doesn't matter because there's nothing I can do about it. So I really want to consider, what does it look like to enforce these types of laws? And I'll make a case for some regional coordination with this. At the moment, from my knowledge, the city of Bexley, the city of Westerville, the city of Columbus, and I believe the city of Reynoldsburg now are the only ones who have passed the source of income non-discrimination ordinance in whatever manner that it's taken place in these communities. And so that is leading to a sort of piecemeal approach with the greater community. So residents, it would be beneficial for residents to know exactly what their rights are and to streamline what we're doing so that we're streamlining the messaging and we're streamlining the enforcement to ensure that residents in all of our communities can get help when they need it. And so with that note, I will put out a pitch that if your jurisdiction is looking at combating source of income discrimination and would like to know more about how Westerville handled it, please reach out to me. I'd love to sit and talk to you and talk about the benefits of it and talk about how to make it so that it's impactful, but also specific to your community. And if you are a member of a community that has already passed the ordinance, please reach out to me as well so that we can see what coordination looks like, because I think it's important to note that fair housing at the national level has some gaps in Central Ohio with how we enforce it and how people access help. And so if we're adding this patchwork of source of income discrimination to it, we just want to be intentional about how we do that to try to fill any sort of avoid any pitfalls before they happen. So again, I would ask that anyone on the call who is interested to learn more, please reach out to me directly and we can discuss.
All right. Thank you so much, Carolyn. This was great. Not only sharing what you and the city of Westerville have been up to, but also giving us a little bit more background about why it is important and sharing these stories. I think that makes such a big difference in really understanding, the policy, why these policies are needed and who they are intended to help. So thank you so much for that presentation. I know we have more questions coming in. Again, we'll have plenty of time at the end, and I will try to get to many of them then. But with this, I'm going to move forward with our speakers and ask Andrew and Tim to come online. They want to talk about how to leverage their policies to attract the development you want. We have Andrew Bauscher, who's the Director of Development at the City of Reynoldsburg. Before taking over as Director of Development for the City of Reynoldsburg, Andrew was a developer for the Air Force, innovating space launch complexes for rockets and missiles in California. He has also spent time as a Community Development Director for the YMCA of Central Ohio and was a consultant on several projects around the region. He's a graduate of The Ohio State University in City and Regional Planning, and Andrew desires to build equity by changing policy and creating solutions to problems throughout Central Ohio. And he's joined by Tim Spencer, who's the president of Trivian Development, a self-described boutique development company located in Central Ohio that works on retail, office, and land entitlement projects. In his 20-plus year career, Tim has been involved in a variety of commercial and residential real estate projects located in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Most recently, he has been involved in the construction and development of a new community-based outpatient clinic for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs that opened in Grove City along Interstate 71 in 2019 with the Ohio State University Hospitals, that James joining the project in 2020. Welcome, Andrew and Tim, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kirsten. We appreciate that, and we appreciate getting invited today to speak to everybody here at NORPC. You've heard a lot of stuff talked about policy and talked about affordability and the housing crisis that's here, that plagues us here in Central Ohio. I want to talk about some of the things that the city of Reynoldsburg and my team here at City Hall has been able to implement and be able to change course here. So I guess we're going to start off. Next slide, please. Great. So in 2018, when I came on board, we created a comprehensive plan. Now, unlike most other comprehensive plans, we knew that we didn't want this to sort of just be shelved and put off, on the counter someplace and not actually be implemented. We had a lot of challenges, and as I like to call it, Reynoldsburg was the sleepy big brother out east. Probably when the new census comes, we're going to be somewhere around 43,000 residents, which certainly puts us in the top tier of a lot of the larger suburbs that are here in Central Ohio. So our idea is that we needed to reinvigorate and revitalize a lot of the core corridors, and we needed to emphasize a ton of new housing. Not only did we implement Insight 2050 ideas that MORPC created, but also their housing initiative as well. Next slide. So in 2019, we followed that up with a zoning code. And by not shelving something, this is what we did. We framed out a framework of specific targeted areas throughout the city, but we also did a future land use map. And within that, we followed it up with the zoning code. So in 1969 is when our code was written, and it was very Euclidean in nature. It definitely separated a ton of different uses, and it made it almost impossible for housing to be built unless it was on 100-foot, width lots, and they were estate type lots, and we just weren't building that. We hadn't built a house in the community for the past 20 years up until this past year, which is really hard, which means that Reynoldsburg wasn't doing its part to help solve the housing crisis. And so with this, we decided that we were going to break down a lot of different barriers. One important one is trying to combat NIMBYism and the idea that the select 10 in a community could say no to what is greater for the entire city and obviously the region. And so we needed to work outside the box, and we needed to figure out how we were going to combat that. One of the ways that we did that was when we rezoned the entire city, we rezoned every single parcel. And we rezoned a lot of those parcels to the best and greatest use. So we found areas where we knew there were pockets of redevelopment and development, and we made sure to give those uses to the best use. So things do not need to go to city council to potentially get shot down. They don't need to go to a list of various boards and commissions. One of the other things that we did was we combined our design review and our planning commission into one board, breaking down sort of more of that red tape to where somebody's got to sit through 4 different meetings by the time they go and get something through. So all in all, when it was finished, you could have an MI Homes development that I'll talk about a little bit later, who went through one meeting and went through approval. In fact, they were approved through planning commission and their major site plan before their annexation was even complete, which is pretty much unheard of. And I think in any other community, you're sitting through, 6 to 8 different meetings and potentially up to a year before a housing development can even get started. So it certainly allows for an expedited timeline. And I think developers need that even more now than ever to try to meet that burden. I think a healthy housing market here in Central Ohio is somewhere between 12 to 20,000 for sale units. I think I just checked this morning to MLS. I think we're at 1,400. So we're about 10% of where we actually need to be as Central Ohio as a whole. The active listings right now in the city of Reynoldsburg are 5. So that's a huge problem. There's not, if there's not the the supply to meet the demand, I think we're going to continue to lose that battle. And so we need to make sure that we're building the housing product that's out there that people are wanting to move into. Another thing that we sort of did was not only sort of break down those barriers, but also within those zones and districts. We had 23 different zones. We brought it down into 9 distinct districts, 2 of those really being civic-minded ones, so 7 true districts within the zoning code. And the idea being was that we were going to take and sort of strip away all the unnecessary regulations that we as municipalities put on developers. The hope is that when we go and do that, we're meeting with these developers very early on and saying, these are the things that we're really looking for. These are the things that truly matter for great development. And you're going to spend the extra time, dollars, and money that we helped you save to give us a better product in the end. So we really have to break those down. So that was the whole goal. This got implemented in 2020. We've even did a minor updates to even make it even more forward thinking. And we're just really happy about sort of everything that we have. I know there's been a lot of other municipalities that have been looking at our code, looking at implementing aspects of our code. And I think, you're going to see that more and more because where we were was you couldn't build multifamily housing. And now we're really trying to get in there and actually do that. Next slide, please. So discussing that a little bit more, you can see the 9 distinct districts. You can see the majority of the single family homes, what we call suburban residential. So another aspect of what we did was instead of having R1 through R4, and again, another, R20 for townhomes and an R40 for multifamily or getting into the medium density, we combined a lot of those together. So we combined R1 through R20 and smacked them together, and we called it suburban residential, because those uses, when we talk about how can we, without greenfield development, how can we bring in more housing into the community? Well, we allow all of the suburban residential accessory dwelling units throughout the entire city. So granny units, garages, studio apartments, above garage type plans, we allow that throughout. The other addition is that you only need a conditional use to go in and build townhomes and condominiums within the suburban residential, which has allowed a lot of breaking down barriers, because I think that, at least in our community, and I know probably across the country, multifamily or townhomes and condominiums are dirty words to a lot of residents that live out here. And I think it's just really sort of a lack of education or the fear that crime is going to all of a sudden seep into the community, which is just not true. It's based in really fear rather than fact. And I think our goal was we needed to break down those barriers. We needed to educate as much as possible, but we also brought the community in a participatory process through this. So our community comprehensive plan, we brought a ton of different key groups in, from religious activities and other community leaders and activists that throughout here in Reynoldsburg, we brought them together. I took a bus tour with our city council members to a lot of the great development that was happening throughout Central Ohio, because you didn't need to throw a stone and you couldn't look very far. So we went to Bexley, went to Hilliard, went to Grandview, and we started painting the picture of what Reynoldsburg could be. And then we showed really great images, and we showed sort of the complexities and how the form and function of that development was going to fit along Main Street and our other corridors and in our community. And it was really an educational, message, really pushing it out to the public, showing them what Reynoldsburg could be. We had great bones. Now we're going to bring that back. Some of the other things that we did too is you see the pink that's right there on East Main Street. That's the white line that splits the screen in half. The blue is the Bryson Main District. That's a high density mixed use district. So think Grandview Yard, think Bridge Park. That is what we're going for. Without a variance, you can build 7-story tall buildings right there without a variance. So it's breaking those down, understanding this is what we're looking for in these areas, working with developers to get to that point, but let's not make it harder than what it needs to be. Of course, we're not looking for 7-story buildings, but it was to set a tone. It was to set an example for anybody else that was looking out past that sometimes the regulations that we create are knee-jerk reactions, and we need to go away from that. So really, you had to throw it all out to restart back over. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about some of the development that we have approved in the last year since the new zoning code has come out, and really kind of go over some of the projects that we have sort of on the books. And I know Tim's going to jump in on some of the projects that he's working with us on, and really talk some of maybe the nitty gritty on some of the things that he has seen of how we have really tried to enforce and try to create more opportunity than more barriers. So this is a Taylor project on Taylor in Maine, just north of the Krogers. This is 120 different apartments with condominiums. You can see in the bottom right corner, this was a studded growth and development. Back in 07, when the crash happened, these stopped. And this has been vacant ground since 2007 with nobody willing to come back in. We reached out actually to Mid-Ohio Development, who was the parent company of the smaller company that did that back in 07, 08. They're finishing out those condominiums, those pinwheel style, and then they're moving on to ranch style. These are pretty attainable pricing points. So when we talk about affordability, Reynoldsburg certainly already affordable. It's why we're the second hottest real estate market in the country, only behind Colorado Springs. And that's not Central Ohio. That was actually Reynoldsburg specific that called us out. So it's a really great company to have. A lot of that has to do with our affordability. And I think a lot of it has to do with seeing where we're going. Next slide. This just right up the road, this is called the Ravines. These are townhome condominiums, which could have never been built in the city of Reynoldsburg before the new code. Next slide. You can see that these are 150 total units here, but we're trying to advocate for smart growth and smart development. So clustering these homes together. They don't all have to have, 70 to 100 foot, side lot widths. They don't have to be estate homes, So the understanding is that we need to build the market for the people that are looking, that's out there now. And sort of, this is some of the product that we're working with. Okay. A little bit further out on East Main, this is right across the street from the State Agricultural Department and the Fire Marshal's Academy. This is called the Eastwood Project. This combines a mixture of uses. You can see the retail and commercial that'll front Main Street. The architecture is inspired by the campus at the Agricultural Department. And then building from that, we're talking multifamily towards the rear. Next slide. I'll get to that one later. Well, I'll show you. So you can, yep, thank you. So East Main is here on the right side of your screen. You can see the office and retail as it sort of flows in. You have multifamily that backs up to that in a really great transitional mode. And then it moves into single family homes, townhomes, and then future growth and development. So you've got about 6 to 8 different products that are actually going to be within this development, and over 1,400 homes over the next 3 to 4 years. Phase 1 will have over 700 various units. That breaks ground this year. Next slide. This is actually phase 1. You can see the commercial, the multifamily, 4-family homes, sort of very reminiscent of what you're seeing in Franklinton with the rear-facing garages to the alleyways, cottage lots that are really meant for seniors, not taking care of a lot of land or yard space, but having sort of a courtyard so they still have an outdoor area. All of it with boulevards, street trees, trails, bike paths, all throughout the entire area. And then understanding that we're encapsulating it with a lot of green space. So great practices. And a lot of this is coming because it was so easy for these approvals to be able to go through. And now we're getting to see the fruits of the labor that we can get a really great product by breaking down some barriers. Next slide. And I'm just going to go through, this is the commercial building up front on Main. Jen, if you want to just kind of knock through these real quick. This is the multifamily property, the townhomes that I talked about with the community gardens, community activity center and pool open for the public. Other row townhomes that'll be fronting the Summit Campus High School. So very cool. This is, this is not something that Reynoldsburg would have ever been known for, or any suburb really, for that. And I think this is a really great architectural detail and a really great unit that we think we're going to attract great empty nesters and young professionals. This is one of the courtyard styles. You can see that the homes sort of are in rows and then little maintenance for those. Next slide. This is the MI Homes development that I was discussing. This is the one that we were approved before annexation even finished. We're having them go off into stub off streets. You can see we've connected with 3, getting a great product. This will be HOA assessed. This is called their smart home product. Starts about 290 and goes up from there. But this fills in a gap of where we didn't have new residential housing for over 20 years. Some of the other improvements that we're doing that's not just related to housing, but also we're talking about amenities and how are we building out equity within Reynoldsburg as a community. So it's not just about providing housing, but it's also providing for things for people to do. So one of the great gyms in our city is called Pinecorey Park. And this park is actually a true limestone quarry. And there's 2 bridges that exist there now. And on the far right of the screen, you can see there's a small little parking lot. The city last year, with forethought from the mayor, myself, and staff, we purchased the property that's along Wagner Road. That's the road that you see off to the west side of your screen. The idea being is we can create a grand entrance so everybody can see it. I think maybe 1 out of 10 people in the city has actually been to the park, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Next slide. Some of the things that we're trying to do is we're building a community based sort of building that's there, some outdoor amphitheater for education, a boardwalk and nature playscape, as well as additional parking so people can come through a grand entrance, trying to work with the metro parks on this development here. Next slide. And I just wanted to share, this is what it looks like. So if you've been to Hocking Hills or Old Man's Cave, this is what's in Reynoldsburg's backyard. It's right in the middle of town. You can see we've got 2 bridges to go through here. It's very nature-esque on our trails that are through there. We're going to mulch a lot of those and emphasize some other new trails that are through there. Next slide. But you can see there are 80-foot tall pine trees throughout with actual rock outcroppings within the city. It is a beautiful park. I highly recommend anybody that's in the area or anywhere in Central Ohio, come out and come see it. It's fantastic. We've got the Reynoldsburg Rock Clubs. They hide rocks throughout the park, as well as we do some concert series that are out there. So it's just adding sort of that other layer. You know, people want to live places, but they also want to be able to be attainable to other resources. So we just talked about the park, but now we're going to talk about maybe some commercial as well. And so through 2 OPWC grant applications, this is an $8 million project that the city's taking on right in our downtown. And all of this leads to other further development, other mixed use development with housing sort of on top. It starts from Davidson and it'll go eventually all the way to Wagner Road. But this was reinvigorating sort of a streetscape that was very tired. We had 4-foot sidewalks on a 55-foot right of way. Well, Bexley only has 50 and they share the same road that we do. So why couldn't we have something very similar? So we took a lot of the great things that they've done, a lot of the great things that Old Worthington has done. And so we're implementing that here on this streetscape with, next slide, utilizing low impact development, bioswales and stormwater retention, utilizing limestone benches. That's paying homage to Pinecorey Park. In fact, it was a limestone quarry. A lot of the buildings that are in downtown Reynoldsburg were built from limestone from that quarry. So we're bringing back elements of nature throughout, new street trees, new pavers throughout. So the idea is that from 4 feet, we can actually go to 16 feet. One of the things that Main Street has is we have 16-foot wide lanes. Well, that's a bit excessive, and it actually creates a highway and not actually a true pedestrian-oriented road. So one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we were allocating those additional space when we were, not cutting away lanes, but shrinking them down in size. So hopefully it slows down traffic where we create bulb outs on our hard corners, but then giving that back to the pedestrians so people can walk. It's already spurred a lot of growth and development that's downtown. I think this next slide, I'm going to let Tim take it over. Nope, that's still me. This is one of our parking spots downtown, another community park type space. These are 3 pavilions with a boardwalk that overlooks Blacklick Creek. It's right adjacent to the Blacklick Trail. So it's a great amenity for people that want to be downtown. I think this next slide is Tim's.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. I think to compound or to pile on to some of your comments, the activity in Reynoldsburg over the last couple of years while Andrew's been there, we caught it on our radar screen when we saw the grant come through for the streetscape and then the parking field that's to the west of this site. And we're intrigued by the commitment that the city was making and hadn't made in a long time. If anyone's familiar, the last time Reynoldsburg had kind of a streetscape update, it was in the early 2000s when the brick pavers were installed and the tree line was installed on Main Street further to the west there. So we saw this as a huge investment and we wanted to see how we could capitalize on it. And we've got a corner here that is right across the street from that public parking. And we're looking to redevelop this opportunity. It's currently a Happy Dragon restaurant. And if you've been around Reynoldsburg for any length of time, it's the original GD Ritzy's from the early 80s. So currently being underutilized, and we'd like to see a mix of uses here. We're currently working with Andrew and his team to come up with that right mix, whether it's retail on the first floor or second and third levels of multifamily properties. Can we go to the next slide? It creates a catalyst and kind of compounds the things that Andrew and the mayor's staff has kind of envisioned. So in addition to that, it continues their efforts with regards to parking in the area, upgrading the quality of buildings and providing the amenities. Much like that park, we see this building as being an amenity for all the residents. When the census does come out, there is 44,000 people in this immediate area. And with all the work that Andrew's been doing over the last couple of years, you're going to see that number continue to go up. Next slide, please. Andrew, you want to kick this one off and then I'll jump in?
Yeah. No, this is great. So there's a couple of things here at play. We're actually going after a Clean Ohio's grant for trails and stream bank restoration project. So this is the Blacklick Trail. You're facing, you're going up north to your screen. So one of the things is Blacklick Trail. We want to create that riparian corridor back again. We're creating rock veins throughout this stretch. This is Huber Park that you can see to the west bank. And then the community center, you can see the outline. So that's the city-led community center. I know I've got a slide later on, so I'll get to that then. But the idea was we need to get rid of the honeysuckle. We need to get rid of the invasive species that are along there. We want to open up the creek, then open up this natural amenity and feature for the city. Well, with doing that, the mayor had a great idea of relocating some space for our service department and our parks department, combining those uses sort of together so it saves us some cost and we can provide more amenities like a petrol station inside, a wash rack, things like that. Well, because of that, it's being underutilized space that we have currently there. So the idea was bringing in Tim Spencer as preferred developer for a public-private partnership, allowing for a new mixture of housing and townhomes, single-family homes that are here, an upgrade to Turo Avenue, which you can see right there on your screen to the east. And then this is right outside of our downtown. So we talk about housing, we talk about a mix. There's carriage style homes that are above garages. So we're actively making the space active. We're creating this walkability so people can get to the community center. We're creating a pedestrian bridge across so we can get to the trailhead, and then allows other individuals to walk up Turo to get to a Vic's Pizza or Prost Beer and Wine Cafe, and all in our downtown and heart of our core. I'll hand it back over to you, Tim. We can talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so this is actually a good example. This is our original concept from last summer, and the current plan that we're working off of is actually much more dense than what you see here. And that's really a function of working with Andrew and his staff and his team to better understand that code, because like many of the folks on this call today, we weren't familiar with what the parameters were. So as we got more familiar with the code and had a better understanding of it, we've been able to take that single family product and really make it an extension of downtown. It's much more dense than what it appears here. And then the multifamily has evolved as well. Again, to provide an amenity, it complements the city's work with what they're doing with the creek restoration, and then ties in with the crossing back over to the rec center. But again, this was early on, and the finished product will be much more dense than what you see here, and workable, and a great addition to the community. Do the next slide.
So this was a quick little rendering. This is probably not what the end result is going to look like, but it paints the picture of what the feel and function of that's going to look like. Pedestrian bridge that goes over the creek. You're cutting down a lot of the invasive species. You're opening it up and creating this amenity. And how great would it be to be able to run or bike on the Blacklick Trail, be able to see into the creek, have the kiddos get into the water and salamander hunt, as well as looking across. And now you have brand new housing, that's not necessarily encroaching, but is also, there and gets to be able to visually see into the creek. We're creating those other amenities and also creating sort of that housing stock, because when we did the comp plan, everyone talked about mixed-use walkable neighborhoods. Well, when you're a suburban community, that's non-existent. So the idea was you have to build into the density, into the existing platform, the existing grid or windy roads like Reynoldsburg majority has, and understanding that you got to sort of rethink, and you've got to take a very, Richard Florida approach to rebuilding the community. Next slide. So one of the other plans here I'm going to talk about this on an extremely, extremely high level, just because it's so underneath the works here. But this is Main Street right across from City Hall, and Tim and the city has an opportunity to redevelop this space before anyone else, and this is building back some of that. We're sketching out office space that's here, but it's also building in job centers, taking a look at structured parking that's here, adding more of that parking for the downtown area for all the other amenities that we talked about and other businesses, and it's adjacent to our brand new community center. Next slide. And I'm just going to buzz through some of these pictures, these really pretty renderings of what we're looking at. But there's one more. Go ahead. Maybe there's a few more. Thank you. Okay, and to the north of Lancaster, and we were just talking about just to the south. Now this is just to the north, within a stone's throw of Main Street. This is the Oliver Project. This will actually be about 150 brand new homes that are within walking distance to Main Street or downtown. Speaking of walkability to Main Street, one of the things that I do like to tout is about 60% of all of the residents in the city of Reynoldsburg are within a 1 mile walking distance of Main Street. When we talk about first mile, last mile, those are really great numbers to talk about, especially when we talk about a BRT line running through Main Street and connecting into downtown and then out to West Broad for that east-west corridor, understanding that 60% of already the current residents are going to be within walking distance of that line. And pretty much everything that we're building now is sort of centered around Main Street and that main corridor. This one, a combination of townhomes and apartments, is a really great feel, and I think it's really going to continuing to activate the downtown area. Next slide. Civic Park. I can't have a slideshow without talking about sort of the mayor's pride and joy here. So this is our largest park here within the city. If you have been out to Civic Park, outside of us launching fireworks from there, there's not a whole lot. There are the soccer fields and ball fields that you see that are out there, but this is not what it looks like. This is a plan from OHM Advisors who we have on contract. And the idea being is this is going to be a 4 to 5 year build out. We're doing all the engineering this year in 2021 and starting phase 1 next year, having a pavilion for rental space, fishing ponds that don't exist there now, a dog park, frisbee golf course, a brand new entrance, which is probably the biggest asset off of Rose Hill. Currently, there's only one entrance, so now we'll have 2 entrances that access the park, relocating the fireworks display. But the idea is new residents, existing residents, but we're able to pay for this because we're getting creative with tax increment financing and TIF districts with a lot of the new housing that's there. And we're putting that money not into city coffers, but we're putting it back into amenities to further drive while people want to be in Reynoldsburg. Next slide. A little bit south of this on Rose Hill, this is a Ryan Holmes project for their townhomes. We're finding niches and clusters of where we can put additional housing within the community. And so we're filling these pockets. We're also allowing, you can see, ample amounts of green space that actually will have the Blacklick Trail actually pass through to the east. So now this community will be able to access the Blacklick Trail and be good to go all the way down to Pickerington Ponds, out to Canal Winchester on the trail. Next slide. A couple of the other things that we've spurred, we've talked a lot about the housing, and that's fantastic. We needed to upgrade our housing stock. We needed to expand the housing stock in Reynoldsburg, but now the commercial things are starting to fall into place. This is a great adaptive reuse project. The greenest building out there is the one that's already built. And this one here is an Hickman Orthodontics. They're taking off the face of the building. They're redoing all of it, bringing it closer to the road, adding the parking sort of into the rear, and just expanding the operations that are already within the city. Next slide. New Kroger development. Next slide. Some of these we can just buzz through. So let me focus on this for a second. So the biggest thing when we talked about the comp plan and we talked about the zoning code was the Bryson, Maine. It's a vacant Kmart that's here. And if you've seen on Biz Journal or the Dispatch, next slide, you've been able to see that we made a large announcement for the Alliance, or what we call the Gateway Project. But it's not just a gateway. It's truly a destination. This here is the corner of Bryson, Maine, and will be the culmination of $150 to $200 million in investment on 20 acres. It also includes the new Metropolitan Library. That's the I building in your bottom right corner of your screen. That will be a 2-story library building. Across from that, we're working in coordination, the mayor, his team, and the city of Columbus on a 10-acre park space that would be adjacent to this to further spur development. But on this site in general, the Alliance is a nonprofit religious-based organization from Colorado Springs. 120 different site visits over the entire nation. They fell in love with the Midwest, and further, they fell in love with Reynoldsburg. And a lot of it was due to us breaking down the barriers. It was all about speed to market, and we had the quickest speed to market. Actually, no one can really touch that right now. The idea being that we're creating boulevards and parkway spaces, having green space, boutique hotel, convention and conference space that's in A and B currently right there, their corporate headquarters space, but also other additional corporate headquarters space as well, other office complex with all restaurant retail. So if you want to envision of what this eventually will look like, it'll be a mini version of Grandview Yard along Main Street and Bryce Road, which is probably the hardest hit pocket of our entire community. So we are trying to have them be the tide that lifts all boats. You take a look at over in the H and the G's, that's housing. One of the things that the Alliance wants to do is dedicate 20% of that housing to affordable, as well as also a retirement type community for their own individuals that work for their community. They're going to bring in additional investors and additional developers to help them with this project. But this is the biggest and largest project the city has ever taken on, and we're extremely excited about this one. Next slide. These are just some images here on the next couple of pages of what the feel and function of that development is going to be. On a couple of these last final slides, next slide, I'm going to talk about sort of what kind of started all of this. Back in 2017, we passed an income tax increase to match ourselves with the city of Columbus at 2.5%. What we did to entice that and to get it passed and approved was we said we're going to increase our ability to be able to put in numerous more millions of dollars into roads. We're going to increase police protection throughout the community, and we're going to build a community center. This community center is what you see during construction. The first story out here to the bottom left, that's actually Ohio Health. We worked with them 15,000 square feet. That's primary care and physical rehabilitation care center right there. The other 55,000 square feet is dedicated to the YMCA. This is a city owned and operated building, but the YMCA runs and leases the main space and does all of the programming. This was a $30 million investment into the community, indoor-outdoor pools with splash pad, and it does give not only scholarships and grants to our low-income individuals living in the community, but all residents get a discount on being a membership here. This is right in front of our existing senior center and right across the street from City Hall. So another great amenity right in the heart of Reynoldsburg. Next slide. One of the other things that we did that I try to tout a lot of is we created a development project story map. So we use our GIS database system and we link all of the development that's happening within the city. One of the things that was really big to the mayor is public outreach. And we didn't do that very well. And it's always hard to find ways to interact with our residents and our community. So the biggest thing that we did is the mayor created a tool called his Wednesday show, a Cup of Joe. So you can have lunch with the mayor and he goes have a bunch of different civic leaders, politicians, community activists and leaders throughout. I was actually on there yesterday myself for the first time talking about a lot of great projects. But we also took it in the development department as well as saying, well, people drive past the site and they're like, well, what's going on there? Well, we wanted to provide a resource. This is a clickable link that you guys can go to. The idea being is that on this link, you can find geosync throughout on a map, what things are being proposed, what things have been approved, things under construction, and things completed throughout the entire city. And you just click through. You actually have a box that shows you a picture, and you can sort of go through and find everything that's going on in Reynoldsburg, at least that's known to the public. So I think that basically concludes a lot of the stuff that we had and we talked about. Hopefully there's some great questions that have come of this. And I know, Tim, if you want to wrap up and maybe conclude and talk a little bit about, overall some of the other stuff, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, I think the only thing I want to add is the light that shone us back to Reynoldsburg, if you will, was again the streetscape plan. And we were extremely excited to get to work with the mayor and Andrew and his team to better understand the opportunity in Reynoldsburg. That park system, that picture I've seen there. I've been by there and walked those trails, and it exists. And I've lived in Columbus my whole life, with the exception of a few years, and I didn't know that was out there. So it's been a great year plus of working with this team, and we're really excited about the opportunities that are coming down the pike. And I think the takeaway I want everyone to know is the code and the work and the energy that Andrew has been working on. It works. I'd love to see more communities in Central Ohio adopt some of the similar protocols or similar ideas, because it is speed to market. It is truly a partnership. It's not one size fits all mentality. So Andrew's done a great job. We're excited. We've got a number of other projects coming down the chute here for Reynoldsburg, but I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. So thank you, and that's all I've got.
Thank you, Andrew and Tim. And as a Reynoldsburg resident, I am especially happy about all the things that are going on there. I'm excited for the public pool that's going to be nearby and the trails that are connecting, but I'm a little worried about my personal private Pinecorey neighborhood park getting too crowded now. I thought it was my park. But no, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. There's a lot of questions in the chat already, but one of the comments I thought I'd share real quick is from Karen Angelou, who's our chairwoman here at MORPC. She said, "Who said zoning and policy can't be exciting? It can." With that, I'm going to ask all our other panelists to turn on their cameras as well so that we can get to a panel discussion. Again, thank you all so much for spending your time with us this morning and sharing such wonderful information with us. I'll get us started with the Q&A session, and then we'll see if we have time. Hopefully we have time to get some of the questions in the chat as well. But if not, I'm sure we can find other ways to answer those. And Andrew, if you can maybe put the link to the story map in the chat so people can access it easily, that would be great. And maybe the same, Francis, for the Nesterly program. And even Carolyn, the link to your legislation too. So that way people have resources available really quickly and at the tips of the hands. So to get us started, I wanted to follow up on the presentation we just heard from Andrew and Tim, and then I'll ask the other panelists some questions. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about intentional development. So Andrew and Tim, we all heard that Reynoldsburg is making it easier for development to occur. But I imagine that doesn't mean that you want to make it easy that any development can happen. So how do you ensure that future development in Reynoldsburg really reflects the comprehensive plan and the desires of the communities and fits within the character of Reynoldsburg as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we did was is ensured that we were properly zoning areas to the desired form and function. And so when it was ordained by City Council, we knew what we were targeting for those different areas, but it's also working with developers. I think one of the biggest challenges that I consistently hear from other municipalities is the developers are dirty, they're bad, they're evil people. And I think that's just a rhetoric that they continue to get. That's not my feeling. And I think you've got to create those relationships, and you have to not be afraid to ask and have those conversations up front. So when new development comes in, basically the zoning code almost enforces them, several months out to start working with my office. And that really starts to allow us to basically educate them on this new code that they've never been working with before. And I think they're extremely shocked. I think Josh Barkin from MI, the mayor, likes to tout this. He walked out of our meeting scratching his head, thinking there was no way that it could be that easy to get something like that done. But it was. And the idea is that they know what the market holds. They know what is selling and what is renting that's out there. So the idea being is that we need to continue to work with them. We need to break down those barriers, and we need to make sure that they're held accountable, but not to the point to where it's detrimental to the project to where they can't get something done. We want affordable housing. It has to be affordable for them to be able to build it. We can't think of them as being evil and saying, well, you've made enough money on this project. Well, that's not how shareholders work. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything on our side to make sure that it's profitable for them so we can get attainable housing in the community.
Thank you, Andrew. As an evil developer, Tim, do you want to add anything to that conversation?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is easy doesn't mean it's the wild, wild west. I mean, that's not the takeaway. There is still design standards. There are setbacks and traditional guidelines that the zoning does need to follow. But I think the parameters are such that they're not a stake in a project. They're not designed to kill a project. And the other thing too, I'll say, is feedback from the city, from the mayor's office down through Andrew, through the water department. They want projects. They want development. They want amenities for their residents. So that's when that comes from the top down, and it's obvious. It's refreshing. We have questions from a technical standpoint, and we have questions from an engineering standpoint. It's not weeks before we get answers. It's usually, I'd be shocked if it wasn't 3, 4, 5 days that we don't get good direction that allows us to continue down the path. And that's key. That's absolutely key.
That's really great to hear. And I think, on the flip side, Andrew is saying that sometimes the developers are getting blamed the same thing. The developers are getting frustrated with, the government development processes as well. And you guys are showing how do you create a really strong partnership and collaboration and conversation around it to mutually benefit and move forward in the right direction. And I think that's probably something that many of our other communities are aspiring to as well. Well, staying on the topic of policy reform, I'm really glad to see that many communities are developing and implementing source of income protection legislations as well as a great first step toward breaking down barriers. But we all know that a lot more needs to be done. So Carolyn, what do you see as the next steps for Westerville, or the steps that even we as a region need to take to address housing discrimination moving forward?
So I'll say the immediate next step is really to coordinate on that education and outreach piece to get to it's kind of it's ridiculous when you think of it that the majority of households wouldn't know where to go if they needed help. So we think of over the last year, 2020, we saw a lot of housing instability just out of the COVID response. People, restricted income, a lot was going on. And you think about how hard it was for the assistance programs to maneuver in those cases to assist those households. Just imagine what it's like for something that's kind of flying under the radar, like housing discrimination is currently. I mean, it is that is the immediate first step. I think the second first step is to ensure that we have neighborhoods of high opportunity for people to choose to live in. And it's very important to do what the city of Reynoldsburg has done to make sure that we're building quality neighborhoods. We're addressing the need for different types of housing. I saw a lot of condos. I saw a lot of different sizes of housing, different neighborhood just formats, how they related to each other. And that's what we need. We need to make sure that there is more housing, and more housing that serves different household needs, so that once we protect people, they have the ability to have housing choice. There's something for them to actually choose.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Just making sure that people have the freedom to choose where they want to live and how they want to live, but also the need to have resources in one place. And it's one of the strategies that came out of the regional housing strategy as well, as can we create this resource one-stop shop place where residents can go, where communities can go for incentives, but it's easy for people to find what they need in order to help them either find rental assistance, find housing solutions, or anything else in between.
And I'll add to that and say too that municipalities need to accept accountability for providing this type of housing and providing these types of communities. Mm-hmm. When it comes to housing discrimination, typically that gets pushed down to the lowest level of government who's enforcing it. That is our responsibility as a community to address, and it is well within our power to address, as Reynoldsburg just showed us. That zoning code is a huge barrier for many of us for providing that housing in the first place. So we need to accept the accountability that it is on us to fix it.
Thank you for that call to action. That's great. Talking about resources and program, Lynn and Francis, you guys have done a great job showing how grassroots programs like Nesterly really provide a support system for older adults experiencing housing challenges. I guess, what would you say are the advantages to addressing housing needs with a bottom-up approach? And what are some of the challenges or limitations to that approach as well? Either one.
Do you have things you want to share? Yeah. I mean, I think that I'll lead off and see what Lynn has to add, but I think that, it's kind of the idea of we want to be able to serve the community in a lot of different capacities. So, starting from the bottom up, like, let's get these tools in people's hands right now so that they can do something today. But it's also so important that that doesn't become seen like that we're not visualizing that as the end goal, right? Like, I think that there are larger structural changes that need to happen, but that we want this to be one of the tools in the toolbox is kind of how I see Nesterly fitting into the community.
And I agree with Francis. I think the big message is inclusivity. And that's looking at things like affordability, accessibility, addressing the needs of, the population across all ages, and not segregating our society, our communities by age, bringing people together and looking at all housing. When I mentioned universal design earlier, that's really something that can benefit all ages. So I think, our message is really to just have options, not, be as inclusive as we can.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And it also makes me think about the importance of making room for innovation. And, no matter if you're at the local government level or at an organization or the development community, how can we start to think more out of the box to come up with innovative solutions that are more flexible than the past and that can really target, the needs of the residents for today. I know we only have 5 minutes left. So Jen, I'm going to ask you if there are some questions in the audience that we should get to right now.
Yes, hi. I am going to go back to a question that was asked toward the beginning of Andrew's presentation from Mindy Justice. And Andrew, I think you could kick us off, but I also think there's a bigger question here that we would love to hear from the other panelists as well. Each of you is sort of out in front with the innovative solutions that you've talked about here today. Anytime you're out in front on something, you tend to be, you're going to face a lot of resistance, a lot of fear of change, right? And so the original question was, how did you combat that, Andrew, in Reynoldsburg, going through that process to get to a code that the community is comfortable with? And I think the bigger question then to anyone who would want to respond is, how are you overcoming that resistance to change within the community?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be the resistance to change. I think that people will always fear what they don't know. And certainly I guess emotion definitely plays a role into it. I think we can only do as much as we possibly can in the participatory process, like we talked about in our comp plan and our zoning code, bringing in various stakeholders and groups and discussing it within detail. But it's also us bringing out there and putting our best foot forward and talking about it before it gets into Facebook, and then all of a sudden it turns into what was really nice apartment complex turns into Section 8 housing, you know, or this word that residents like to throw around to I don't know the full psychology of why people do the things that they do, but it definitely makes the job a lot harder. So I think for us is one, we want to put out all of the factual information first and foremost. And number two, when we pre-zoned all of the parcels there within the community, it was a document that was put out there for everyone. So there were always going to get some pushback. Even with everything that we've done, somebody has complained. The idea is that we need to be listening to the region. We need to be listening to the majority of our residents and not the 10 loudest individuals that happen to be on social media, because those 10 typically are the ones that are the loudest and that try to, rev up sort of a crowd. And if you're, putting out all the information ahead of time, you can combat that a lot. I know that anytime that we have something, we always know that it's going to be an uphill battle and a fight, but that's what we're here for. And if we don't want to do that, then maybe we're in the wrong career field.
I still remember being the lonely resident in a room full of opponents a few years ago before you had updated your zoning code and comprehensive plan supporting a multifamily project near downtown that would have really added some walkability and density to the area. And so you're combating that to a certain degree, but I agree it is really important to include the residents up front in the development of the update of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan, and then be transparent throughout the entire, throughout all these processes that are happening. Jen, do we have one more quick question?
There's a good question here from Nikki Lemon that asks the panelists, how do you see public health impacting or partnering in these housing efforts?
I would jump in really quickly to say that Nesterly's model specifically, I think one of the things that is exciting and interesting about it to me, we know that loneliness and social isolation is one of the biggest predictors of someone's overall health and well-being. And so again, if we can get this tool in people's hands to make it easier and safer for them to share their home with someone, I think that the impacts that we can see down the line can be really promising. So just another lens for what we're working on here.
I'll say my first thought, Nikki, when you wrote this was around that whole idea of areas of opportunity. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant by public health, but one of the factors when you're looking at a high opportunity area is really the issues of environmental justice. Are we building housing in areas that don't have noise pollution or air pollution? Do they have quality sidewalk access and walkability, recreation opportunities? I think really the key to that is not looking at housing solely by like the number of units, but what is the quality of the units? Where are the units located? What is the community the units are located in, and what opportunities does that provide the household in that community? And so looking more comprehensively about how the location, the type of housing allows the households to interact with their environment in a way that's positive, which I think has positive public health aspects right there.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And that was a great question, Nikki. And we can certainly talk for another 30 minutes or more on this topic. But to keep us on time, I have to unfortunately end today's conversation. That doesn't mean we won't have more conversations like this in the future. If you had a question and we didn't get to it, I know our panelists would be more than happy to hear from you. So we'll make sure you have their contact information as well. And with that, I want to thank you, Lynn, Francis, Carolyn, Andrew, and Tim, so much for participating and for being willing to share your thoughts and experiences with us. And also thank you to all of you in the audience for listening in and sharing your thoughts and comments and questions. We hope to see all of you for the next installment of the Regional Housing Strategy Speaker Series on Friday, April 30th at 11 a.m. And until then, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.